The first thing you notice about the neighborhood is how quiet it is. Not peaceful quiet, but wrong quiet. The kind that makes you look over your shoulder, the kind that makes you second guess whether you should have come here at all. But for me and Emma, this place was supposed to be our fresh start. After years of saving and struggling, we finally managed to put a down payment on this charming little house on Cypress Lane. The realtor had described it as quaint and full of character. And it was. The house had a wraparound porch, tall windows, and an old oak tree in the front yard that seemed to have seen 100 summers. But she forgot to mention the silence. I noticed it as soon as we pulled into the driveway. No barking dogs, no kids playing, no hum of lawnmowers or music drifting from open windows. Just the low hum of the wind and the occasional rustle of leaves. "Feels like we're the only ones here," Emma said, her voice tinged with unease. "Perfect for us introverts, huh?" I tried to joke, but the knot in my stomach told me I wasn't convinced either. The first few days went by uneventfully. Emma and I unpacked boxes, made the house feel like home, and marveled at the fact that we actually owned the place. But the quiet never left. We finally met one of the neighbors on the third day. An older woman named Mrs. Holloway who lived directly across the street. She appeared at our doorstep with a tray of cookies and a smile so wide it looked like it hurt. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said brightly. Her enthusiasm felt forced, like she was trying too hard to seem normal. Her pale blue eyes flicked nervously toward the house next door as she handed me the tray. "Thanks," I said, glancing over at the house she'd been looking at. It was dark, its curtains drawn tightly shut. "Is that place empty?" I asked. Mrs. Holloway froze for half a second, her smile faltering before returning with unnerving speed. "Oh, no, dear. The Montclairs live there. Lovely people. You'll meet them soon, I'm sure." But we didn't meet them. Not that day. Not that week. The house remained dark, no sign of movement. Then, on the 7th night, we heard it. Emma and I were lying in bed, just about to drift off, when a faint scratching noise pulled me back to consciousness. At first, I thought it was the branches of the oak tree scraping against the window. But when I listened closer, I realized it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the walls. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. Emma nodded, her face pale in the dim light. "What is it?" "I don't know." The scratching stopped suddenly, leaving the room in an eerie silence. I got up, grabbed a flashlight, and cautiously checked the house. Every room, every closet, even the attic. Nothing. When I returned to the bedroom, Emma was sitting up, her knees pulled to her chest. "Something's wrong with this place," she said, her voice trembling. "I can feel it." I wanted to tell her she was overreacting, that it was just an old house with creaky walls. But deep down, I felt it too. The next day, I decided to ask Mrs. Holloway about the Montclairs. "Oh, they're such private people," she said, her hands twisting nervously around a dish towel. "But don't worry about them. I'm sure you'll get along just fine." There was something odd about the way she said it, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. That night, the scratching came back. Louder this time. Emma refused to stay in the bedroom, so we slept on the couch in the living room. Or tried to, anyway. Around midnight, I heard what sounded like footsteps in the hallway upstairs. I grabbed a bat from the closet and crept up the stairs, my heart hammering in my chest. The hallway was empty, but the air felt heavy, like something unseen was pressing down on me. Then I saw it. A faint sliver of light coming from the attic door. My hand trembled as I reached for the pull string. The stairs unfolded with a creak, and I climbed up, one step at a time. The attic was empty, except for a single rocking chair in the corner. It creaked back and forth, though there was no breeze. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice shaking. No answer. I turned to leave, but something caught my eye. Carved into the wooden floorboards beneath the chair was a series of symbols. They were crude and jagged, etched deep into the wood. The same symbols I'd seen faintly scratched on the walls downstairs. The next morning, I told Emma everything. She wanted to leave immediately, but something was holding me back. A sick sense of curiosity. "We need answers," I said. "Something is happening in this house, and I need to know what." Emma reluctantly agreed to stay one more night. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I noticed movement in the Montclair's house. The curtains twitched, and I could have sworn I saw a face peering out at me. I grabbed a flashlight and crossed the street. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house was dark and cold, with a faint smell of decay. I called out, but no one answered. As I stepped into the living room, I froze. The walls were covered in photographs. Of me. Of Emma. Of us moving into the house, unpacking boxes, eating dinner. And in every photo, there was a figure standing in the background. A figure with glowing red eyes. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the photos. They weren't just candid shots, these were taken from impossible angles. From inside our house. "Emma," I whispered under my breath, panic rising like a tidal wave. I needed to get back to her. I turned to leave, but then I heard it. The faint creak of a floorboard from deeper in the house. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice breaking. No response. I aimed my flashlight toward the hallway. The beam wavered slightly as my hand trembled, illuminating the narrow passage. At the end of the hall, the shadows seemed darker, denser, as though the light couldn't penetrate them. Then the shadows moved. A tall figure stepped out of the darkness, its head tilted unnaturally to the side. Its eyes glowed faintly red, just like in the photographs. I backed away, bumping into the wall. "Stay back!" I shouted, gripping the flashlight tightly as though it could somehow protect me. The figure didn't listen. It moved closer, its footsteps deliberate and heavy, like it wanted me to hear every step. I bolted out of the house, my heart pounding. I didn't look back. When I burst through the door of our home, Emma was sitting on the couch, her face pale and strained. "We have to leave," I said, barely able to catch my breath. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Jack, they were here." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" She held up her phone, and I saw the photo she'd taken moments earlier. It was of our living room, taken right where she was sitting. In the reflection of the TV screen, there was a figure standing behind her. It was the same figure from the Montclair's house. "We're leaving. Right now," I said, grabbing her hand. We threw what little we could into a duffel bag and ran to the car. As we sped down the street, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The Montclair's house was dark again. But as we turned the corner, I saw the curtain twitch. They were watching. We drove through the night, not stopping until we were hours away. I tried to convince Emma, and myself, that it was over. But even as we checked into a hotel, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, as we lay in bed, I woke to the sound of scratching. I froze, my body stiff with fear. It was coming from the wall behind me. "Jack," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's not over." I turned my head slowly toward the mirror across from the bed. In the dim light, I saw it again. The same red eyes glowing faintly in the reflection. And then the whisper came, soft but chilling. "You can't run." The whisper seemed to echo in the room, bouncing off the walls and burrowing into my mind. My pulse raced as I pulled Emma closer. "We have to leave," I said, my voice trembling. Emma nodded, her eyes glued to the mirror. "It's already here." Without another word, I grabbed our bag and headed for the door, Emma close behind. The hallway outside our hotel room was eerily silent, the flickering fluorescent lights casting long, distorted shadows. Every step felt like a marathon, and the air seemed heavier with each passing second. "Which way to the stairs?" Emma asked in a hushed voice. I gestured toward the end of the hall. "This way." But as we walked, the hallway seemed to stretch, growing impossibly long. The more we walked, the farther away the exit seemed. "This doesn't make sense," I muttered, panic rising in my chest. Then, the lights began to flicker more violently, plunging us into moments of total darkness before coming back on. In one of those brief blackouts, I heard Emma gasp. "What is it?" I asked, spinning around. She pointed ahead, her hand shaking. At the end of the hall, just visible under the dim, flickering light, was the figure. Tall, impossibly still, and watching us. "We have to go," Emma whispered, pulling on my arm. But when I turned back, the figure was gone. We broke into a sprint, my grip on Emma's hand tightening as we ran. When we reached the stairwell, I flung open the heavy metal door. The echo of it slamming against the wall was deafening in the suffocating silence. The stairs spiraled down, lit only by faint emergency lights. We didn't hesitate. As we descended, the air grew colder, and the sound of our footsteps echoed unnaturally, like we weren't alone. I glanced over my shoulder, and my stomach sank. The figure was descending the stairs above us, one slow step at a time. It didn't hurry. It didn't need to. "Faster!" I shouted, pulling Emma along. But no matter how fast we moved, the figure seemed to gain on us. Its presence was oppressive, a weight that pushed down on my chest and made every breath a struggle. Finally, we burst through the door to the ground floor, slamming it shut behind us. For a moment, there was silence. I pressed my ear to the door, listening for any sound of pursuit. Nothing. "Did we lose it?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. Before I could answer, the door began to rattle violently, as though something was trying to force it open. "Run!" We darted into the parking lot, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped them. Emma yanked open the passenger door and slid inside. I wasn't far behind, slamming the driver's side door and jamming the key into the ignition. The car roared to life, and I floored the gas pedal. As we sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The figure was standing at the edge of the lot, its red eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. It didn't chase us. It didn't need to. We drove for hours, stopping only when we reached a truck stop in the middle of nowhere. Exhausted, we slumped into a booth at the diner, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. "We can't keep running," Emma said, her voice flat. "I know," I replied, though I had no idea what else we could do. As the waitress approached with 2 steaming mugs of coffee, she froze, her gaze fixed on something behind us. "What's wrong?" I asked, turning to look. In the reflective surface of the diner's window, I saw it. The figure was sitting in the booth behind us, its red eyes glowing faintly in the glass. And then it spoke, its voice a low, menacing whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You belong to us now." The whispers in my head didn't fade, they grew louder, morphing into a guttural growl that shook the air around us. The figure in the clearing twisted, its form unraveling like smoke caught in a storm. What was once a shadow transformed into a mass of writhing, grotesque limbs, elongated, clawed hands, a hunched back covered in jagged spines, and a face that was a gaping maw filled with rows of glistening, needle-like teeth. Its eyes. There were too many eyes, all of them glowing a sickly yellow, blinking independently, fixed on Emma and me. I froze. The air around the creature shimmered like heat waves, and its rancid breath hit me like a wall. It didn't just exist, it consumed everything around it, bending the world to its will. "I am Thalkryn, the keeper of veiled things," it rasped, its voice like metal grinding against stone. "You tore the veil between our realms, and now you must pay the price." Emma stumbled backward, her lips trembling. It wasn't supposed to be real. It was just a mirror. The creature surged forward, each step shaking the ground beneath us. Its claws raked the air, leaving behind glowing trails of black energy. Reality is fragile. You cracked it, and now your world will bleed into mine. I knew running wasn't an option. My instincts screamed at me to flee, but something about Thalkryn rooted me to the spot. It was like the creature wanted me to stay, to confront it. "Emma, get back to the car," I shouted, gripping a heavy branch from the ground. "What are you going to do?" she cried. "Buy us time," I muttered, though I had no idea how to fight something that wasn't entirely of this world. Thalkryn moved with an unnatural speed, its hulking body slamming into the ground inches from me. I barely dodged as its claws tore through the earth, carving deep gashes in the soil. The glowing spines on its back pulsed, releasing bursts of black mist that burned my skin. "You cannot fight me," it hissed, its teeth clicking together as it grinned. "You are nothing but an ant beneath my gaze." I swung the branch at its face with all my strength. The wood shattered on impact, barely phasing the creature. "You amuse me," it said, dragging its claws along the ground as it circled me. "Perhaps I will take my time devouring you." But then Emma screamed, and my blood turned to ice. I turned to see her frozen in place, tendrils of black mist coiling around her ankles, pulling her toward Thalkryn. No. I charged at the creature, but it lashed out with a whip-like tendril, sending me flying into a tree. Pain exploded through my ribs, and I gasped for air. I saw the mirror lying in the grass nearby, its cracked surface glinting faintly in the moonlight. "Thalkryn," I shouted, my voice ragged. "You want this, don't you?" I held up the mirror. The creature's many eyes focused on the mirror. Its movements slowed, its claws retracting slightly. "You have no idea what you hold," it growled, its voice vibrating with rage and hunger. "That is a fragment of my prison." A plan formed in my mind, reckless, desperate, but it was the only chance we had. "If it's a fragment of your prison," I said, stumbling to my feet, "then maybe it can contain you again." Thalkryn roared, its maw opening impossibly wide, revealing a churning void of darkness inside. The ground beneath me cracked and split as it lunged forward. I held the mirror aloft as the creature closed in, its claws swiping inches from my face. The mirror began to hum, a low vibration that resonated in my bones. The cracks on its surface glowed with an otherworldly light, growing brighter as the creature loomed over me. "Emma!" I shouted. "Run! Now!" She hesitated for a moment, but then turned and sprinted toward the car. Thalkryn's attention snapped back to me. "You dare challenge me with my own fragment," it bellowed. "You are nothing." The mirror's glow intensified, the light cutting through the darkness like a blade. I gritted my teeth, focusing all my energy on the object in my hands. You're right, I said. I'm nothing. But this isn't about me. I thrust the mirror forward just as Thalkryn lunged. The moment its claws touched the surface, the mirror exploded with light. The creature let out a deafening screech, its body convulsing as tendrils of energy wrapped around it, dragging it backward. No, it roared, its many eyes widening in fury and fear. This cannot be. The light from the mirror engulfed everything, pulling the creature into its fractured surface. Its massive form twisted and shrank until it was nothing more than a black shadow writhing inside the glass. The mirror fell to the ground, the glow fading. The clearing was silent. The air was still, the oppressive darkness gone. I staggered to my feet, my body aching from the fight. The mirror lay shattered at my feet, its fragments no longer glowing. Emma ran back to me, her face streaked with tears. Is it gone? I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure. For now. We didn't speak as we walked back to the car. The highway was still empty, the diner a distant memory. But as we drove away, I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw something that made my blood run cold. In the distance, at the edge of the forest, a faint yellow glow flickered. Thalkryn's eyes. And I knew, deep down, that it wasn't over. Not yet.